Good afternoon, dear friends. As always, we continue to study the situation on the front lines daily. Before we begin, I would sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps support its growth. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Yesterday, negotiations took place between Russian and American delegations in Istanbul. They lasted for more than 6.5 hours, and it is clear that much broader and more complex issues were discussed beyond just the resumption of diplomatic missions, as officially stated. Additionally, yesterday, the press secretary of the Russian president, Mr. Peskov, stated that the territories belonging to the Russian Federation under the constitution are inseparable. It is clear why and for what purpose this was said. Also, it is worth paying attention to a statement made by one of the commanders of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, UAF. He said that the war would inevitably resume in a few years and that preparations should begin immediately. Well, we continue to analyze the situation on the front and open the map. So there have been very good news from the Kursk region in recent days. This is what we will discuss today. The pace gained by the Russian army in the Kursk region is perhaps the highest in the last 5 months. Probably not since October has there been such momentum, at least in the Kursk region. Just consider, in the past 2 days, 5 villages have come under Russian control. 5 villages have returned home in the last 2 days. That's the pace, and 2 more villages are on the verge of being taken as well. Let's go through everything step by step. First of all, I consider it necessary to explain why such a pace has become possible. It became possible due to the Russian army's advance into the Sumy region. Yes, even on the map, it is clear that the visually confirmed advance into the Sumy region was not very deep, just over a kilometer from the border. As of now, Russian positions are in the area of the village of Novenkoye. But I must say, even this has turned out to be more than enough. Why? Let me explain. Look, here is the main supply road for the UAF garrison in the entire Kursk region. It runs from Yunakovka. This is the village of Yunakovka, the main logistical hub for supplying the Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region. Through this road, ammunition was delivered, battered units were rotated, reinforcements were brought in, the wounded were evacuated, and so on. For a long time, the highway was out of reach for Russian forces. Even for effective drone operations, it was too far. Everything changed when the Russian army broke through from north to south and took control of the village of Sverdlivka. Now, Russian positions have moved closer to the highway. However, the distance is still around 8 kilometers, which is significant. That's the maximum range of many FPV drones, typically around 8 to 10 kilometers. To reduce this distance and significantly improve fire control over the road, the advance into the Sumy region was carried out. You might ask, can such a small advance in depth really make a big difference? My answer is yes. Let's look at the map. From Sverdlivka, even from the furthest Russian positions, the distance to the highway is 7 kilometers. Now let's check the distance from the current Russian positions in the Sumy region near the village of Novenkoye. Look, what do we see? About 5 kilometers, a perfect range to destroy everything moving along the highway, and that's exactly what is happening. This is why the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered a total collapse of their defenses in northern Kursk region. Once again, in just 2 days, UAF forces have lost 5 villages in northern Kursk region. Now I'll explain and show everything in detail. As I said, the front line in northern Kursk region for the UAF has started to collapse rapidly. Positions they had held for months fell within just a couple of days. This concerns, first and foremost, this defensive line along the road. Look, Russian forces had been storming this line since autumn. There were constant attacks, but there was no significant success. And there was no success because reinforcements were constantly being brought in. If a battalion was destroyed, a new one from the Sumy region would replace it. If a couple of BMPs were destroyed, new ones were brought in from Yunakovka. That's why, for months, it was more of a positional struggle. The front, if it moved at all, only shifted by a few hundred meters per week, not more. There were even back-and-forth battles, like in the village of Kruglenkaya, which changed hands 3 times recently. Everything changed after Russian forces advanced into the Sumy region and established tight fire control over the highway. No more reinforcements, no more ammunition resupply. And now, look, in a powerful counterattack, UAF positions were simply wiped out. The long-suffering village of Pogrebki was taken under full Russian control. A few hours later, UAF forces were driven out of the neighboring village of Orlovka. Yes, Orlovka is a small village, just a single street with houses along it. So after retreating from Pogrebki, the UAF could not hold Orlovka and fell back to Novaya Sorochina. However, they couldn't establish a defensive line there either. The battle for the village lasted just a day before it was taken by Russian forces, forcing the UAF to retreat further to Staraya Sorochina. At the same time, in addition to Pogrebki, Orlovka, and Novaya Sorochina, another village was also liberated. Here it is. This is the village of Marievka. There is no longer any Ukrainian armed forces UAF defense hub here. This salient will be cut off in the very near future. Around 7 square kilometers of Kursk land will return home. At the same time, the UAF is now trying to establish a defense hub in this cluster of villages. Staraya Sorochina, Malaya Loknya, Viktorovka, and Nikolaevka. As you can see, these villages practically merge into one another. This is where a real battle will unfold. Even without reinforcement supplies, the UAF will be able to hold their defense here for some time. But again, not for too long. Russian forces are already making gains here as well. As I mentioned, 5 villages have returned home in the last 2 days. I named 4 of them. The 5th is this village, Nikolsko. A long-suffering settlement, as attempts to capture it have been ongoing since January. I even showed one of these attacks on my channel. At that time, the assault ended unsuccessfully for Russian forces. Most of the attacks here had been unsuccessful, with no ability to establish a foothold in the village. However, after the UAF's logistics were disrupted, the latest attack finally brought the long-awaited success for the Russian army. Over 2 days of fighting, UAF forces were driven out of the village. Now the primary objective for the Russian army is to cut off this entire salient. This is the most immediate task. Personally, I believe that given the fire control over the supply route, this goal will be achieved very soon. For the people of the Kursk region, there is, for the first time in a long while, a real hope of returning home soon. 5 villages were taken in 2 days. 2 more are on the verge of being captured. One of them is the village of Lebedevka. You can take a look. Some Telegram channels have already reported that Lebedevka has been fully taken by the Russian army. However, let's remain objective. UAF forces are still present on the outskirts. So let's not rush things. But in the near future, perhaps even today or tomorrow, Lebedevka may also be taken by Russian forces. The second village on the verge of being captured is Kurilovka. Toretsk direction as of February 28th. Situation in Toretsk. Over the past 3 days, fighting has continued in the Toretsk direction. The Ukrainian armed forces are attempting to break through into Toretsk and secure a foothold there. The lack of a continuous front line in this area allows for advances, leading to constant clashes within the city limits. One group managed to break into the center of Toretsk but was pushed out during the fighting. The offensive side's tactic involves breaking through in armored vehicles, when possible, deploying troops, and attempting to hold captured positions. Meanwhile, the defending side is focused on detecting such groups on the approaches to the city and eliminating them. If a breakthrough cannot be prevented, the response is to block the landing zone and then eliminate the group. This tactic by the attacking side diverts significant forces from the defending side's own offensive operations, creating certain strategic advantages. The situation in the area remains tense. There are reasons to believe that the defending side's command has not yet found an effective way to counter this tactic. If a solution is not found, it could complicate the operational situation in the future. In effect, the attacking side is now using a strategy that was previously used against them. Similar developments are being observed in the Pokrovsk sector, indicating that one side is actively searching for, and seemingly finding, practical ways to counter the enemy's tactic of infiltrating small groups through defensive positions. So far, this tactic has proven effective on at least 2 sections of the front, requiring the defending side to develop new countermeasures. Bolshaya Novoselovka direction, as of February 28th. Burlatskoye, Privolnoye. By the morning of February 28th, one side's forces had completed the capture of the settlements of Burlatskoye and Privolnoye. continuing their advance toward the village of Shevchenko, a key logistics hub in this sector. At the same time, attempts to secure positions near Dnipro Energia are ongoing. However, the defending side is actively deploying reserves, allowing them to maintain their positions. Offensive operations in this direction continue. Well, that's all for today's Frontline update. I bid you farewell, wishing you a great last working day of the week. Take care of yourselves and see you soon.